Yes, people, I want to start this video by saying thank you to every single one of you who's been supporting the Vibes mixtape, whether you've been streaming, whether you've been buying, whether you've been sharing with your friends, sharing on the socials. It really does mean a lot. So thank you if you're watching this video. What we wanted to do was do a video where we totally break down the whole mixtape. Both myself and my manager Tom have sat down together. We both run Morii Records together, which is where the Vibes mixtape has been released. So it's a question about every single track on the mixtape, a real deep dive into the whole creative process behind every single track, all my influences, and everything about the mixtape. So stay tuned, and I hope you enjoy the video. Big up.
Man, Vibes mixtape, man.
Okay, yes.
Yeah. So we had Heaters first.
Yep.
In this mixtape series, Morii Records.
You know it.
Very exciting compilation of tunes on both fronts. But whereas Heaters was all bass heavy bangers.
Yeah, absolutely.
All 140 BPM. All dubstep grime crossover kind of.
Yeah, definitely griming.
Dirty,
edgy,
naughty.
and cold. Yeah.
Yeah, cold. And there are a few different flavours within that kind of realm.
Yeah.
But this is a completely different proposition, but still very much within the ENiGMA Dubz realm.
Absolutely, still bass music,
yeah,
but on a different flavour completely. Yeah,
and I don't know. Yeah, I mean, the mixtape series was when we discussed it and we talked about the concept and and what it means to be ENiGMA Dubz as an artist, and also to release on our own label, is allowing you to explore, you know, these different realms of your sound, and some people know you for the more bass heavy, harder hitting system tunes.
Yeah, man.
And others, you know, from back in the day might actually know you more for the future garage stuff. And it's really interesting how we can bring your whole audience with you to check out these different.
Yeah, for sure.
Do you know what I mean? These different vibes.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, I thought it'd be cool for us to do a little interview so you can discuss it and, you know, hear it from the horse's mouth about what it's been like for you creatively, also, you know, the promotion and
absolutely
all sorts.
Yeah.
So, I mean, like, firstly, like, I was interested sort of what does this kind of the Vibes direction, what does it mean to you? And sort of artistically, like, what were you looking to achieve with this body of tracks?
Yeah.
And like something we've discussed before, I guess, is like the mixtape's quite cool because there's no rules to a mixtape.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? That's why we're doing it. Like an album obviously has to be such a complete journey almost, and artistically is, I don't know, it's a very wholesome package, whereas a mixtape we can kind of be
a bit more
there's no rules
with it.
And like everything's on a flavour, but there's less rules.
It all still fits together, but for sure.
So I was just like, I guess sort of where to start is sort of what Vibes means to you artistically, and what were you trying to sort of achieve with the tunes on this release?
Okay, I'd say with Vibes, the thing is, as you just said, from day one, I've always done a mixture, and I think from the earliest days, the bass heavy stuff was prevalent, definitely, but then there was a totally different audience that got into my stuff from my earliest future garage and vibey stuff, and I've always loved making it, and my head is in a different place when I make it. Yeah, and I've said this before on interviews as well, but making the vibey stuff is like therapy. Yeah, and making the heavier stuff is pure outlet of just. Not rage, but is the dark side allowing to come through. Yeah, exactly. And because I've got such a passion for the dark side of the music because of how I got into the electronic music world. But the vibey side of it, as much as it's therapy making it, when I'm not producing and I'm not in the studio, when I'm in the car, when I'm on the train, I gravitate to that side of music more anyway. Do you know what I mean? So it's where I'm sort of... my headspace goes outside of being producing anyway. Yeah.
In terms of just a listener.
As just as a listener, And the soulful nature of music gets my emotions going. Yeah. And that's where I sort of gravitate towards.
I think as well, that's like an interesting perspective is what is the purpose of tunes? Do you know what I mean? Like some are all about the rave and the dance and a massive rig going off, that energy and that feeling.
Yep.
Some of it is like cold, it almost makes you feel isolated.
Yeah.
And like it can slap, but in a different way. It's like eerie and nasty.
100%. Yeah.
But whereas with this is more about music to unwind to and escape to, and
100%. Yeah.
And like, while I'm sure, like in your sets, the tunes, I mean, you've played a few, haven't you?
Yeah.
And they still do the business in the dance, but it's a very different experience. But it's something that maybe people can listen to more at home.
Yeah,
or,
outside the rave.
Yeah, you can relax to as well. Do you see what I mean?
On a journey or whatever it is.
Yeah.
And the other thing I was conscious of with this mixtape, a lot of my earlier vibey music that's got a lot of people wanting to hear it live.
Yeah.
The problem I have is sonically, it doesn't feel like it fits a set very well sometimes.
Right.
And when I play a live set, as much as I want to play tunes that people want to hear, I also want to feel like the set feels like the right energy.
Yeah.
And it's like when you play an old tune that was produced some years ago, regardless of who it was by, quite often you find a complete change in dynamic in the set, which isn't always a bad thing, but I'm conscious about keeping a certain energy. And by changing the mood, you don't have to lose the energy. It just has to sonically work.
Yeah.
So some of the older tracks, like one of my earliest vibey tracks I did was a bootleg of Sigur Rós.
Right, yeah.
And I've had a lot of people on tours saying they want to hear it. And I did actually play it at Lunar Tide one year. And people loved it, but...
Was that 21?
2021, yeah.
Yeah.
And people loved it, but even from my perspective of hearing it in comparison in the set, I was like, damn, it sounds so different sonically. That's not a bad thing.
And is that due to the advancements in production techniques?
Yeah. It's to do with the
the mix down. Yep.
And it's also as well, what I've learned over many years of doing it is having my head screwed on in regards to how it's going to be portrayed over a system as well as how I feel about it. So certain vibey music that I made really early on, I didn't even think twice about how it was going to sound in a rave. All it was like, I'm just totally expressing myself, which is good to do.
Yeah.
But with the Vibes mixtape, as well as expressing myself, I've also thought to myself, I want to play this out as well.
Right. Yeah,
so I thought I'm going to approach it on a production level, both from a vibey perspective and also on a system perspective. So it's got the best of both worlds to it.
Definitely, man.
So that's what I've done with this one.
Yeah, and like in terms of sort of the emotions you're tapping into, like, it is very emotional. It's very, as I said, that word escape, it's taking you to a different place.
Yeah.
Like, what sort of inspiration helps you feel that? And is there anything emotionally that drives you for that kind of stuff?
Yeah.
I'm just interested to get into your like psyche.
Into the headspace.
Yeah.
It's hard to explain. I'm sure I've been asked this in a recent interview on the Vibes mixtape, but I generally feel like the headspace for the vibey stuff is always there.
Right.
I feel like that's just my natural creative headspace.
Yeah.
And what it is with me is when I listen to music, there are certain frequencies and sonic sounds which just get under my skin.
Right.
And once they do, I'm sucked into it immediately.
Yeah.
Certain resonances in bass, certain chord progressions that are like slightly melancholic sometimes, and they just suck me in then, and I'm lost. So whenever I make the vibey music, I do find that the sessions come together so fast, and I don't really stop to think about it, which I think is the best form of creativity as well.
So it's just flowing.
Yes, it's almost already there, and I'm discovering it, and it's just coming together, and that's the best feeling.
So like the songs flowing through you almost.
Exactly. And
it's a bit of a cliche, but it is true.
Yeah.
Yeah,
and I go into almost like a trance with it, and that's why I call it therapy, because it's almost meditative for me as well, because it really is just a total escape from what I'm doing. Whereas when I make the bangers and stuff, the attention span of staying with the project is sometimes shorter, but it's because of the nature of the tune, if you know what I mean. And I don't necessarily produce them to be a totally listening journey all the time.
Yeah.
They're more to do damage in a set.
Exactly, just to go off.
And sometimes you know that the tunes are going to be played for a minute and a half, and then you're going to mix the next banger in, and that's kind of where the scene's got to. But there's also tunes like Walk Away on the Vibes mixtape, which I've made as a sort of darker 140 bit, but it's more of a listening experience as well.
Defo.
So I can play that out, and it has the same system energy as the other dubstep bits I'm playing, but it's more of a journey through the tune.
That was, I mean, you ended your set in Manchester with that.
Yeah.
And like obviously as someone, who's running the label with you, I heard these tunes months and months ago.
Yeah.
But I didn't realise how weighty the bass is in that tune. And even though it's still quite like it's moody, but it's more relaxed than something like Loco or some of your really upfront tunes.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's a lot more broody and but the actual bass warmth and the weight in the subs was significant. But it's interesting as a listener. Obviously I know that the presence is there, but it's only when you hear it on the system that you actually fully appreciate, wow, this is going off.
This is actually working on the system as well. And because I made that tune during a tour.
Right.
So I was on tour at the time when I made it. So I'd just recently done a set in Seattle when I made the tune. So my head was still on tour mode, but my mind was slightly more detached from the sound system music. And then I wanted to play it in my sets as well.
Yeah.
And I think last year especially, I did actually end a lot of sets with Walk Away.
Right.
Yeah. Loads of sets I ended with Walk Away, and I knew it was going to come up eventually.
Yeah.
And it just kind of, even if there was somebody after me who was more hype, it then just allows people to be like, oh, okay, this is the ENiGMA Dubz journey.
That actually worked really well with Casper coming on after
exactly,
you.
because then he lifts again.
Yeah, exactly. So it's almost, not quite a palette cleanse, but almost like a palette
cleanse. It is,
yeah. It's taken them to a slightly different space.
Yeah.
That then when the next banger comes in, it slaps really hard.
Yeah.
And also, I think that kind of segues into my next point in that I think it's important to treat, audiences with respect in the fact that people do enjoy different moods and vibes, and not everyone. Some people do just want banger after banger after banger, and they might only be into the ENiGMA Dubz heavier 140 tunes, but a lot of music fans do want stuff for different moods, or you might wake up in a different mood, and on your commute to work you want to listen to, do you know what I mean?
Absolutely.
And what I found interesting is obviously big up Deep Tempo, but they played Walk Away. They started their last podcast episode with it. And a lot of the dubstep heads were loving it.
Absolutely.
Do you know what I mean?
It's sick to see, man.
And then the reaction's been really positive, and I just think that goes to show that people do want different feelings, and emotional responses to music.
Yeah.
And how does that make you feel as an artist that you can kind of flex
and do that?
Yeah.
I love it, man. This is why I got into dubstep. This is the reason I fell in love with it, because flashback to that first rave I went to in Leeds, my experience going to that rave was, it is going to kick off in here, because I was so used to going out to baseline and grime nights in Birmingham and stuff, where it was moody music and a moody crowd. And quite often people weren't at the event because they were music lovers. They were there to get wrecked, or they were there because other people were going to be there, possibly gang related and stuff like that. So when I went to Subdub and I walked into the Koki tune playing, and the mood of it in there, and I'd never been to a rave where everyone's facing the DJ. I was used to going to club events and stuff.
Yeah.
And everyone had their hoods up and it was dark and he was playing Goblin. And I looked at Kate, my wife, and I was like, oh my God, it's going to kick off so bad. So I was kind of on edge for the first 10 minutes, in a good way, because I was enjoying the music, but I was ready to move.
There was
if
a
it
level
kicked
of
off.
sort of anxiety.
There was an anxiety going on, but in a way I was used to. But the whole night, there was no bad vibes at all. And the range in music changed so much, and everyone was there for it, do you know what I mean? Whereas in other events I've played at, people are there for the hype and to hear the tunes that are popular. And if you deviate too far, people don't want to know.
Yeah.
And I've always found the dubstep scene to be really open to new stuff as well. So that I think that's why, from the word go with ENiGMA Dubz, I've always ventured out and done a different style at each release, or every opportunity. I'm like, I'm just going to go there within reason.
Yeah.
I won't just put out a pop house tune or
not the
anything.
synth plugin.
Yeah.
Reason.
Not Reason. Yeah. Actually, funny enough, it was Reason to start
exactly.
with. Oh my God,
it's gone full circle,
it's a double whammy. But yeah, I think that's really why I fell in love with dubstep. And then hand in hand from getting into dubstep came the moodier and the more soulful sign of garage and the future garage.
Well, that was something I wanted to unpick, actually. That moves us on quite nicely to that. Okay. Is that I think it's a good opportunity to kind of tap into that side, because before, I think some people might think, I mean, quite rightly in many ways, but they'll associate you with dubstep.
Yeah.
Straight first and foremost.
140.
You know, and those darker, sometimes those fat synths. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But actually, your musical journey as a listener, as a fan, as well as a producer, before even the ENiGMA Dubz, you were producing garage and speed garage.
Yeah.
You know, for years
That
before
was it,
and I think what I'm hoping we achieve with Vibes as well is to reconnect and people understand that the garage thing has been there from day one.
Do you know
what I mean? And I know, like, obviously a lot of your future garage tunes have had good traction.
But you're right, though.
But do you know what I mean? I think it's important that people know that this isn't you sort of...
Yeah.
I mean, not jumping on a trend.
No, but true, yeah.
Yeah, but
100%.
like, because garage is making a resurgence. But the fact is, you've always been true to that.
Yeah.
And it's something that you've always sort of looked to bring into the ENiGMA Dubz, and this is kind of almost reminding people.
It is,
Do you see what I mean?
On the right sort of, in the right style. So that, as you say, garage was my entry to all of electronic music, but under ENiGMA Dubz, it always felt like the garage I made was the therapeutic side of it for me. So I'd always get lost in it and end up going soulful.
Yeah.
Not even soulful, but like that kind of... There is an element of coldness to it, but it's very atmospheric still.
Yeah.
Very immersive.
Soundscapey.
So it's more immersive garage. It takes you on a journey and you don't necessarily listen to it on a system.
Yeah.
It's more for getting around and on a journey or travelling or whatever. So I haven't done that many upfront garage tunes as ENiGMA Dubz.
Although they're Window Kid tunes.
So that's what it is as well.
Yeah.
Doing the Window Kid tune, for me, that was just like me taking myself back to how I was when I got into all this, before ENiGMA Dubz. And then I had a lot of people hit me up just like, oh, damn, you made this. And I'm just like, well, yeah, these are my roots, but you just don't see much of it from me. Yeah. So after doing the Window Kid collab track, I realised people were like, oh, damn, ENiGMA's on this vibe. So it's like, well,
and it can work. I mean, and now what's interesting in a lot of your sets, you'll go 130 before you go 140. And sometimes for the longer sets, you'll start vibey, but there's that transition sort of zone. Yeah, which is between 130 to 140, where you can still then play some of the more kind of harder garage tunes.
Exactly that.
That kind of serves as a great sort of transition into the 140s.
It's perfect for it. And because garage has got so much traction again at the moment, I'd say over the last 18 months, it's really crept back up again. Yeah. And also
in the US scene.
That's what I was going to say. So in sets over the years, I've never shied away from playing garage stuff, but I've definitely noticed over the last 4 tours that I've done, the reaction to the garage has been a lot more clued up. Yeah. Whereas first of all, when I was touring and playing garage, in America especially, people didn't quite gravitate towards it or get it. Yeah. Whereas in the UK, it's always been a staple of the underground. Yeah. And now the garage, which is popping again, is a throwback to the garage really that I got into in like 2004, 2005, but a lot more current in the production, but still very much there. Yeah. And worldwide, people are just like getting it as well.
Yeah, it's really cool to see actually.
Sick, mate.
As a UK music fan. I mean, obviously I love music from everywhere, but it does make me very proud to see the impact that UK garage, it's the clues in the title.
Yeah, 100%.
We are the epicenter of that. Yeah. And to see now the sort of culture spread. Yeah. And also, like, from a historical point of view, like, people are now looking back and seeing, where did dubstep come from? Yeah. And it came from garage.
Yeah, it came from the fusion of garage and jungle and dub, and then people experimenting from the garage scene, or people coming into it from the jungle scene and making garage but not making it correctly. And then suddenly it's like, oh, what's this form of garage? And then you've got dubstep coming through as well. But then you've got to remember as well, the US garage scene was massive as well. And then artists from the US garage scene bringing in a totally different flavour, like a bit more soulful, like Chicago house influence garage. Sort of sounds popping again now.
Also, I guess there's that slight breaks crossover.
Well, the breaks crossover's definitely there as well. Yeah. But I feel like now, at the moment, because Breakbeat came round really full force, and in my opinion it was Glue by Bicep which kind of got that trend. And the other mad thing is Glue is an old tune that kind of definitely in the underground had its place, But on the level at Bicep R now, it was nowhere near that level. No. And then suddenly there's some traction going with Glue. You've got big advertisements using Glue and stuff.
Syncs, massive syncs.
And syncs and stuff. And then you've got Breakbeat came back again really strong with this kind of euphoric vibe to it. And I feel like now the Breakbeat and the garage scenes have kind of merged to a point where you've got this extremely cool garage mixed with breaks movement going on.
Yeah, because it's like the percussion sort of on some of the tunes in Vibes fits somewhere in between.
Yeah, exactly.
A breaks pattern and a garage pattern.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah,
like, and that's been quite cool and quite interesting.
It's been really cool. And it gives me more places to go in sets as well. And some of the tunes on the Vibes mixtape are like perfect transitions between a breakbeat tune and the garage section as well, which is really cool.
Well, and like, you know, I mean, shout out DJ Q.
Yeah.
But he obviously played Free Your Mind on Kiss in his garage set.
Yeah.
And like, don't get me wrong, there's you could have a debate as to whether it's a garage tune or a breaks tune, but it's somewhere in between. But it
is, yeah.
But it mixed really well.
Really well.
Do you know what I mean?
It sounded great. And it was coming from a tune which wasn't on its vibe either.
No.
And you know what's really cool with that? I know DJ Q knows my music from before ENiGMA Dubz when I was DJV and I used to make bassline.
Yeah.
And I'd get support from Q on that scene and I'd be playing Q's tunes out.
Right.
And then fast forward how many more years and now he's playing ENiGMA Dubz tunes on this Vibes sort of sound as well. So when that came through, I was like, oh, this is sick. This has gone full circle now in sounds.
Very cool.
Really cool.
Yeah, sick. Well, like one thing I thought could be cool is to actually just go through a little track by track.
Yeah.
Of like, now we've done a bit of background,
yeah,
you know,
for
like
sure.
Just talk through each tune.
Yeah, man.
So I guess, like, you know, whether you want to expand on the songwriting process, what the tune means, or like chord, or like production, or do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Or just the general feeling of what you like.
Yeah.
So like, yeah, I mean, track 1, I Still Think of You, feat Leo Woods.
Yeah.
I mean, what a vocal.
That's what it is.
Yeah.
That's what spurred the whole tune as soon as I heard the vocal.
Yeah, so I mean, to give people a bit of a, like, I guess, peek behind the curtain. So, I mean, this came about through you checking out our publisher's a cappella bank.
Yeah.
And you heard this.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, I mean,
for sure.
Want to explain? So,
well, yeah. So my publisher gave me access to this catalogue of material from various vocalists, and they said go through it and find stuff that you like, that you want to work on.
And this is exclusive, by the way. It's not the same as like
it's not like Splice and stuff like that
where anyone has access.
It's like a locked room that you get a password for, and you can check out all these artists who are also published by the same publisher. And as soon as I went on Leo Wood's page, I think I Still Think of You was probably the first one I listened to from her. And as soon as I listened to it, I was just like, what on earth?
Yeah.
And because what I did purposely is I loaded up the bank of acapellas and I loaded up a synth pad on my keyboard. And while I was listening to them, I was just laying down chords underneath. So as soon as I heard Leo's vocals on that, and I was pairing it with these kind of moody but like really rich and powerful sounds, I was like, wow, I've got to go epic with this tune, because her vocals next level,
and her range as well.
I know.
I mean, because that is pretty high,
really high.
Like, I mean, I don't actually know what note is that.
I don't know. I can't remember. I mean,
it's a high register.
Yeah, with the powers she's got as well.
She's belting it.
Yeah, she wasn't falsetto with it, even though she can even do that as well.
Yeah,
but she was going all in with it.
And that gives the track actually a lot of energy.
Yeah.
And like what I think as well with this tune, it's got almost like that, you know, that early 90s.
Yeah.
Kind of, you know, when sort of, I mean, I might be speaking out of turn here, but you had the rave scene.
Yeah. And
it wasn't so genre
specific,
defined, or like this is house, this is techno, you know, this is tech house, or this is drum and bass.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah.
And you had those kind of just epic, just dance tracks. Do you know, people just refer to it as like dance music or rave music. this kind of like throws me back a bit to that because the vocal has that kind of epic.
That's what it is, yeah.
Quality to it. Do you know what I mean?
It's all about the vocal taking it, rather than thinking about it as though this is the hook, this is the verse. We're going to.
I'm thinking tunes like like Rhythm Is a Dancer. And,
yeah.
all those classic.
Yeah, those apps. Yeah, yeah.
And don't get me wrong, the beat is very different, but
yeah.
but it gives me a slight flavour. It's like almost I'm reminiscing then about those.
Yeah.
Tunes,
for sure, yeah.
When you're going out for the first time as a like 16, 17, 18-year-olds, you know, at your local club.
Yeah.
Those,
I know what you mean, yeah.
It's still that.
The DJ's not specifically playing one style. It's kind of the tunes that are going to go off.
Yeah, there's just the heritage behind the tune, and they know if, you're whatever shitty local nightclub.
Yeah.
The DJ's playing stuff that hopefully will connect with whether you're fucking 50 or whether you're an 18-year-old.
Yeah, for sure.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But this tune but obviously also what I think is interesting about this tune is it is quite weighty. Like the bass slaps slap's the wrong word, but there's a lot of
weight to it still, yeah.
Yeah, and what we said was that, were you conscious of that when you were producing it?
100%.
Because and the percussion, pops pretty nicely on it.
Because the percussion with I Still Think of You has got a little bit more atmosphere to it in comparison to, say, Free Your Mind, which is also breaky. But with I Still Think of You, because the vocal was so powerful and the way I treated it was quite wet as well, so it was like a big sound.
Yeah, I think that's part of what I'm referencing.
Yeah.
With that epic quality.
Exactly. So I wanted the whole production to sort of marry with that rather than the vocal being epic and going too sort of dry with the percussion. And what actually happened was, when I was building the track, it wasn't the percussion wasn't quite where it is now. But on one of the actual breaks loops that sat behind the rest of the percussion, I just whacked a load of reverb on it and brought it down in the mix. So it's almost like you've got this back of the room vibe going on.
I noticed that with the snare.
Yeah.
Well, I say snare, it's more like a rim click.
Like a rim click, yeah.
I know, but the kick, I still thought punched.
That's
quite
what I mean,
nicely.
though. So what I did is I got the main. It's not the main breaks loop, but there's a breaks loop at the back of the mix, which is really wet. Then the kick's quite heavy.
Yeah.
There's a heavy snare at the front,
and it's quite a simple kick pattern as well.
Yeah, really simple.
Yeah.
And then there's some shakers which are up front in the mix, but because you've got this back of the mix massive reverb break loop, it kind of makes it feel like that's like touching the vocal on the wetness and the epicness of it. Yeah. And then it gives it this big sound, you know what I mean?
And would you say also, because you're sort of, I guess, more of a journey as a music listener, I know that you were into, like a lot of us were, to be fair. I remember like Ministry of Sound 2004 was one of my favourite compilations when I was a teenager.
Yeah.
And like my sort of transition from being predominantly a rock music fan to then getting really into hip-hop and then urban music and then electronic music, and Ministry of Sound was a big thing.
Yeah.
But that kind of trance,
the trance is
the trancey epic synths, like there's that, the sort of climax of the tune.
Yeah, on the second drop.
The second drop. Yeah. You've got those really cool sort
big
of
trance leads.
Yeah.
That's
and
what
would you say
are
they trance?
100%.
Is that a trance influence? Like,
and before I got into garage, which was where I really gravitated towards producing music, my earliest journey into electronic music was through trance and hard house.
Right.
So when I was, say, like maybe 12 or I bought this compilation called Hard House Nation from HMV.
Yeah.
So I was going to
shout out HMV, man. Some of my fucking music memories.
All of my music memories. HMV, all the compilations I've got.
Things have changed obviously a lot.
Yeah.
It's just the way the world is now.
And it was sick, man. I had my Discman. Before that, I had the Walkman. But I always remember going to classical concerts, and all the way there, I'd have my headphones on, and I was listening to hard house and trance CDs, and the euphoria of it would just get me buzzing all the time. And there was also a CD. You know Sonique, the singer?
Yeah.
Well, Sonique was a DJ as well, and she did this CD called DJ Sonique's Club Mix. And it was a double CD, and it was all like hard house and big trance tunes. But it was really weird because she vocaled live over it.
Oh, right.
So
As
she
she's
was
mixing.
singing while she was mixing, and now I listen back to it, I'm like, this is mental, to be honest, because they didn't even process her singing.
Oh, right.
So, but at the
So
time,
it sounded quite. Her voice sounded quite raw.
really raw on it.
Yeah.
But
in a way, that could maybe give it a bit of energy.
I don't know, man. It just had this mad vibe, and you
Yeah.
know what, as well. The more I've got into production and the more I've learnt about production, the harder it is for me to switch off. But back in those days, I didn't know how anything worked. Whereas now I listen back to some of the tunes I used to love and I'm like, why on earth did I love this tune? Because now I'm listening to it and I'm like, this is...
You're analysing it from a technical
This doesn't
point of
sound
view.
great, blah,
Yeah,
blah, but
yeah.
before that, you just get lost in the moment. So many tunes. I used to listen to the Scooter album.
Oh, yeah.
Me and my friend Jay used to listen to the Scooter album
Shout
at the
out
bus
Scooter.
stop. Out to Scooter. I used to absolutely buzz listening to Scooter. So it is coming back to I Still Think of You. And actually, most of my sort of euphoric, there's an old ENiGMA Dubz tune called You Make Me Feel.
Right.
And loads of people love that tune and ask for more. It's just a really euphoric, hard-hitting dubstep tune. And that's paying homage to the trance influence of my music, because I love trance music.
Yeah.
And you hear it in my synths. And even when I make the darker stuff, a lot of the synths that I use are very trance-sounding synths, but just treated differently. So with I Still Think of You as well.
So it's nice to see those meld, excuse me, like, of all those influences come together in a track that makes it kind of its own feeling.
It
and
is
vibe.
that, yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
So you've got the trance side of it, you've got the sort of like big epic vocal, you've got the breakbeat percussion, and then you've got the bottom end still influencing my ENiGMA Dubz dubstep side
and
of it
if
as
you're
well.
playing that out, I mean, I can't wait to hear that out.
Me too.
Like, yeah. Because that's fucking...
Yeah, it's a powerful tune.
It's a big tune. And big up Leo Woods, man. Like, she's been
Massive
a pleasure
up
to
to
work
Leo.
with as well.
Yeah.
From Morii. But yeah, moving on to Float With Me, track 2.
Yeah.
So, I mean, this one, you know, it's... We had an interesting debate. It's like, is it future garage or not?
Yeah. We did, didn't we?
Yeah, and it's like... But
it
anyway,
is as well.
it doesn't really matter.
No, but I do get what you're saying, 100%.
But like, yeah, it's just... Oh, it's a really... It's moody.
Yeah.
And sort of euphoric. It's weird. It's like uplifting.
Yeah.
But still melancholic.
It is, yeah.
And like quite introspective in a way. Like it makes you think.
Yeah.
Deep, you know what I mean?
Yeah,
It's like but it's still. I mean, the title "Float With Me." It's like you know, it is. It's a beautiful tune.
Yeah, it's still got a feel good nature to it, but at the same time, there's a bit.
But
of
there's
a,
that tinge of slight sadness or like emotion. I guess emotional depth. You know, like.
Yeah.
But a lot of good music does that. Do you know what I mean? It sits in that realm where it feels uplifting and like you're escaping, but there's a complexity to that emotion. Do you know what I mean? It's not not just simple.
Yeah.
Because, you know, don't get me wrong, some amazing pop music where it's just pure ecstasy.
Yeah.
But that can get a bit tiring.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah,
Whereas
yeah.
this... Do you know?
I totally
there's
agree.
that complexity of emotion, and that's something that's really nice.
Mm-hmm. That's what draws me to the music that I love when I'm not in the studio as well. It's that middle ground where it's kind of like there's an uplifting nature. Because I actually don't listen to much music which is just straight uplifting.
Yeah.
Because even when you were talking about trance music, even trance music was really euphoric, but there was this raw energy and dark elements to it as well.
The lyric...
Yeah,
it was often about a breakup.
Yeah,
or
I can't let you go,
or missing someone, or
sure.
not quite being able to connect.
Yeah.
So it's like almost using music as a vehicle to escape, and almost almost like a cathartic.
Yeah. So there you go.
Element to it.
Yeah.
And like that's what I mean. Actually, I forgot to ask you about it. Maybe it's something we can bring up more at the end.
Okay.
But it kind of, I guess. Is relevant to what you're talking about with Float With Me.
Yeah.
Is like some of the influences that inspired you with vibes. Like, I mean, obviously you're your own artist, but you're still very much got your ear to the scene. And
yeah, for sure.
Like artists like Over Mono.
Yeah.
They're very interesting because the tunes have that upfront escape euphoria, but there is that depth of weight, and some of the lyrics are very like almost abstract, but like they're not straight I'm happy. Do you know what I mean? There's and I'm thinking of their what's the big tune?
The Good Lies tune.
Yeah, Good Lies. Good Lies. It's sort of from the perspective of like you're not quite sure where the vocalist or lyricist heads at.
Yeah.
Do you see what I mean?
Yeah.
Or the character's heads at with it. And like I don't know whether that kind of stuff inspires you.
Yeah, it does.
Where it's like it's still super catchy and you want it very infectious, but there's like that emotional
and not fully making sense.
Yeah,
I've said this to you before. I very actually rarely listen to tracks and listen to the lyrics.
Right, yeah.
I hardly ever listen to lyrical content. I just listen to the sound, the riffs, and how they all work together with the music, and I just get lost in the overall sound of it. And another thing I loved about future garage and the more soulful garage was, especially with artists like Burial and stuff, the way that vocals were sampled. They weren't sampled with a sort of narrative in mind.
No.
It was more just the flow and the melody it would add to the tune. So it's quite often R&B vocals, which were like pitched down, and most of the time you couldn't even tell what they were saying. And then you'd be like, what is that? What is that track saying? Like Archangel Burial.
Yeah.
The amount of times I've been on YouTube and looked in the comments and people have written paragraphs of what it's saying. And it's not saying that, but they think it says that.
Well, no, but that's the whole, when there's that ambiguity.
That's what I love.
It creates.
Yeah, because everyone takes it for them what they think
Yeah.
and has a piece of it for themselves. And with Float With Me, first of all, the production and the percussion was a throwback to Hard to Smile.
Yeah.
Because with Hard to Smile, that tune really did come out of nowhere for a lot of people. And the way I produced it was the percussion was very raw, and the snare that I used wasn't a snare. It was like just a percussive sound. It was like it sounded like somebody hitting like a bin or something like that, like an industrial sort of knock sound.
Yeah.
So when I made Float With Me, I thought to myself, you know what, I'm going to go back to that sort of sound, especially on the snare. And then the vocals came last. And then while I was producing it, I got the percussion to sound really woody and a bit more organic. The hi-hats and stuff keep it lifted, so it gives it the energy of the garage. And then the bass, if it was just the percussion and the bass, it wouldn't sound uplifting at all. It would actually sound quite moody. But then I started to build the synths around it, and the synths are kind of melancholic, but they bring this kind of question like, where's this going now? And then the vocal on top, because I pitched the vocal up to replicate how I used to love garage tunes back in the day as well, where you'd have this slightly pitched up vocal. That's where you get this like melting of like moodiness, rawness, but then a slight bit of upliftingness going on as well. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it all melts together, and then you're just like, wow, this is taking me in a zone now. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, and like something, I mean, sort of as a drummer myself, like I always sort of, a lot of electronic music, the first thing I'm really picking apart sonically, sort of analytically in my head is the drums, obviously, and the percussion. And like the snare sound, is it like a gated reverb or something that makes it...
Yeah.
It's a very short reverb.
It's a really short time on the reverb.
Yeah,
so it's
and like it's that gives it kind of this almost... It's so weird. It's like retro but futuristic at the same
100%,
time.
it is really retro.
I mean?
Yeah, that's what makes it feel like old to me and like nostalgic as well. It is. It's like a really short reverb time, but a heavy wet signal on the snare. So you're hearing the room louder than you're hearing the snare, really. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's a cool way of doing it to get that sort of vibe, and that was I did that on purpose.
And what you're saying also about lyrical, because with this tune, it's like the samples are not really there to add the lyrics.
No,
it's more, and that's something that Fortet does as well.
Yeah,
incredibly well sometimes. Like, you know what you're saying about Burial, and
it's
not. It's that mysterious.
It's that mysterious, and even like MK on his early house stuff.
Yeah.
The way he chopped and sampled vocals, like when you listen to, oh God, what's the tune? No, it's not that one.
Storm Queen.
Not Storm Queen. I'm thinking of the
through.
earliest one before that, his biggest house tune, where everyone just was like, what is the vocal? What is it saying? And it's not really saying anything, but the flow of it and stuff, and there is
so infectious.
There is like a syllable in there, but it's like, what is it? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. Wicked, man. Nice. Well, I love that tune, by the way.
Cheers, man.
Really, really do love that one. I mean, I love the whole thing. And I would say that because it's been released on our label, but...
You better say that.
Yeah. But yeah, moving on to Free Your Mind, track 3. I mean, the reaction has been...
It's been class, mate.
Like, we couldn't have hoped, really, for better.
Really couldn't have hoped.
Had radio play on Kiss.
Yeah.
Like, it's just been playlisted by them. Spotify have playlisted it on New Music Friday for the UK. Which,
man.
To see, for a small label like us, you know...
It's a big deal.
To be on that alongside genuine pop stars and stuff is really fucking sick. And that's testament to the tune, first and foremost. But, man, again, the vocal, Lauren Lamont. Yeah. I mean... What a talented artist she is.
Like, big time as well, on the production side as well.
Yeah, because 1111, she's got a production alias. Yeah. It was interesting, like, when you jumped on that one. So that was another from this a cappella bank, and you just... But what was interesting, you changed a bit of the arrangement of the vocal, didn't you? Or you cut a bit out just to make it fit what you had in mind.
Yeah, so, it wasn't the flow that was on there initially, because Free Your Mind actually came first. Because we've been sat on that one for a bit, haven't we? We've been patiently waiting for that one. And that got premiered in Denver last year on tour.
And you've played out a few times.
It's been played out since then, yeah. But it's been sort of sat in the locker. And what was really cool with Free Your Mind was it was a collaborative effort on the end product with Lauren as well.
Yeah.
So I made the tune, sent it to Lauren. She had feedback on the overall sound of it. We tweaked bits here and there. And so everyone was happy with it, which is really cool to do. But funnily enough, the track that's on the mixtape wasn't the first version of Free Your Mind. So initially I did a different style tune for it, which was totally outside of the ENiGMA Dubz realm. And I built it as like a kind of poppy, housey kind of thing for a separate project altogether. And then once I'd done that, I was like, I've really got to do an ENiGMA Dubz tune with this because I loved it so much. Yeah. So I didn't show anyone the first version. And funny enough, I don't think anyone's heard it. And
I don't think I have either.
It's just sat on my hard drive and it does work, but the ENiGMA Dubz one just made so much more sense. And yeah, that's another one like with Leo Wood where I heard the vocal. I was jamming with it really to get a feel for it. And I knew I wanted it to be kind of breaky as well.
Yeah. That's what I mean, because it's got that garage and breaks crossover. Do you know what I mean? You wouldn't say it's a straight breakbeat.
No.
Because the drums are a bit more staccato. Do you know what I mean? It's in like there's, you know, with breaks, there's often a lot of the kind of ghost notes on the snares.
Yeah.
Whereas this is the rhythmic pattern's a bit simpler.
Yeah.
But it's not straight garage because it's not as quite choppy.
Yeah, there is still like a breaks loop element to the beat, but it's more straight.
Yeah.
And it's not really busy, not like the classic Amen break sort of vibe.
Yeah, exactly.
It's more garage influence. And also on the extended mix, there is a section.
Got that, and that is garage.
There's a section towards the end which is straight up garage, just a sub bass flow.
And the choppy synths.
Yeah, exactly. And the way I did the vocal, I was like, right, this is just straight garage. And then on the edit, you don't
That's
get
what
that
DJ
bit.
Q played, actually, wasn't it? So, yeah.
He played the extended one. Man. But then with Free Your Mind, the synths are not as trancey. They're a bit more retro.
Yeah.
Kind of 80s sounding synths. And
it's quite a simple chord progression.
Really simple.
Yeah. But that, in a way, sometimes that's all you need.
Yeah.
And like, because it's quite emotive.
Yeah.
Do you know, like, what about the harmonies? Because it's quite a simple chord progression, sort of note wise, and like, you know, it's one that I think is used quite a lot.
Definitely. And
but the harmonies that you've accompanied with it, or is it like the sort of note choices to build out the chords create a different kind of mood? I don't know.
It's still that melancholy in there as well.
What
Do you know what I mean?
So is it a minor key?
It's going from minor to major, to major. So it like has a sadness to the chord, but then it resolves to happiness, and then you're just like torn between the two.
Yeah, but that's that space again, isn't it? Like where it's like uplifting, but still a bit reflective. And
and anyone listening to this who then starts digging into my catalogue will realise, damn, this guy's all about that.
Yeah.
And that's the music I love. So the music I listen to outside of the studio always has that element of like being in the middle of happiness and sadness. Do you know what I mean? Yeah.
Yeah, sick, man. And it was great to see this go out on UKF as well.
Hell yeah.
Big up UKF.
Much love for supporting.
Yeah, man. Like, it's fucking cool as well.
Yeah.
You know, again, you know, like we're a small label, a 2-man band. But, you know, to be getting uploads on UKF is really sick. And
For sure.
Big up to Camilla and the whole team there.
Yeah, we really appreciate that, and also Lauren and her management as well, because that's
been sick to work.
It's been
with.
great to work alongside with you.
And it was like that to me. It was the tune to lead with on the release day. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Just because the hook, and this is another one where that arpeggiated synth that you bring in on that
in the build up
is the second drop, because
yeah,
what I find interesting about that is you don't even have the chorus hook really.
No,
you just have it once as it drops.
Yeah, well, I know. And then it's almost like a chorus of synths then.
Yeah, exactly.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. And that's quite interesting actually, that then the vocal doesn't come back until the outro.
Yeah. But then that brings us back to the trance influence. So all the biggest, trance is just basically a huge build up and then total elation, do you know what I mean, on the drop. So when I was building the track, like what tends to happen when I'm making music is I lay everything down in one big go, have all the synths, have all the bass, and I'm just vibing. And then I go, right, I need to structure the tune and strip it back and go on a journey with it, piece it together. And because I built this massive euphoria before building the tune, I was like, I've got to go there.
Definitely.
So on that breakdown, I was just like, then it creeps in. And then that second drop is basically everything I'd laid down whilst I was vibing with the vocal.
Right, I see.
Do you know what I mean?
That's like full bar.
So then that's just like, rip your shirt off on the top of the rock. Just forgot there.
Come on.
And then it's like, right now, calm down, Jay. Come on.
Yeah. Come on.
So that's
show
how
a bit of restraint.
That's how it is.
Have a bit of respect.
Have some respect. Let Lauren sing again. Stop messing on synths.
Nice, man. Yeah, but sick tune, man. But yeah, moving on to track 4, which I'm trying.
You're going to look at me now, aren't you?
I should have had the track list.
Do you know what? We can do.
Oh
my gosh, I can't even use my phone.
No, wait, I'll be able to work this out.
Come on, Tom.
Twilight was after the break, and it's not Walk Away.
No, not yet.
This
is amazing.
We Can Go, not We Can Go.
Was it the reprise next?
No, because that's track 6.
We might need to load this up and have a look.
Was it We Can Go?
We're going to have to look.
I think it is We Can Go, mate.
Okay, let's go We Can Go.
No, it's not. It's Glow.
Okay,
Yes, right, that makes... I now got the track list. So Glow is the next tune.
Okay, yeah.
Great prep there.
Yeah, you know it. That's what this podcast is all about.
So, yeah, man, like... Again, I mean, this is straight up sort of breakbeat vibe. Like, I don't know, it's a slow builder,
It's a slow builder, and it's just very, like, introverted in terms of... It's kind of like a real nostalgia trip for me. I made it as retro as I possibly could. Even the vocal...
the percussion itself is
percussion's got like a filter on it, so it's not bright, and it's kind of like low in the mix. Put some distortion on it as well, so it sounds a bit like tape sounding.
Yeah, it's definitely got that analog kind of quality.
And the synths as well. The synths are kind of analog. The synths are actually part of this like UVI analog emulator package which I've got, which is like a homage to loads of synths from the 80s and stuff like that. So I used purely that for this track. And then the vocal as well, I pitched it down, and it's another instance where you're not really sure what the vocal's saying, but it just has this like quality to it. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And like, even though it's not on the vibe, it reminds me of like M83 and stuff like that, where it's a little bit indie sounding.
Yeah.
And then it's just a slow progression of like getting slightly more depth as it goes on. And then once again, there's another ARP that comes in on the second drop. But it's not like an epic sound.
And it's not really in your face. It's quite... I mean, subtle is probably saying a bit strong, because it's still very much there.
But it is a lot more subtle when you compare it to like I Still Think of You and stuff.
In terms of sort of level-wise.
In terms of levels and like... In Glow, there's not a massive contrast between the synths in sort of dynamics. They kind of all sit together in like the mid-range, if you know what I mean. And I kind of wanted that. It's like lo-fi sort of approach. Yeah. It's almost got a lo-fi feel to the tune.
Well, that's where, because there's definitely an electronica almost crossover here.
Yeah.
Where I'd say this is maybe, I mean, I could be wrong, but it's the one tune that you wouldn't say is a bass music tune.
Yeah, exactly.
It's more...
And even the bottom end isn't that heavy on it.
Yeah.
Because I didn't want it to be too weighty. Yeah. And there's some little sub drops in there which really come out in the mix, which are there for the weight of it. but then the main Reese bass
So
kind
the
of sits higher register.
So the sustained bass isn't as...
Yeah, it's not,
like,
and it's kind
yeah.
of sitting higher up. And like, without going too technical, I've got a real like love of writing music in E and E flat, because that's where you get serious sort of like sub pressure around 40 and 30 hertz, which is like the sort of like level where on a system suddenly you're like, holy shit, do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Whereas
yeah.
on a car or whatever, you feel it but not fully.
No.
Whereas with Glow, it's mainly at like 80 and 90 hertz, which means it comes through on all speakers, but it wasn't with a system in mind.
And what key is this?
Oh, it was. I don't actually know off the top of my head, but it would have been sitting in sort of like G or A, a little bit higher registered.
So, yeah, what is that, about a fifth? No, E, F, G, A. Yeah, so like fourth.
Yeah, fourth steps sort of thing.
Yeah.
But then the riff starts around about a G. I might not be correct, but then it comes down and hits around about an E. And then when I play the sub notes,
well, that's what I noticed, because you bring in the sub in the intro, sort of midway through, or on the last note, is it? Or
it's just a two notes at the end of like a 16
and it just
bar
adds
loop,
that warmth,
and it just adds a bit of that kind of garage sort of influence to how that would have been, or like the jungle sort of approach with the low sub 808. It's like an 808 kick, yeah.
And what I found interesting about this one on the promotion side for it is like, obviously we sort of, pitch the tracks to different playlisters and, beyond like Spotify editorial and YouTube channels and stuff. And the sort of electronica crowd fucking love this tune.
Yeah, sick.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like it's had really good response. And, and I think that is that kind of bicep.
Yeah.
I know this one's a bit more, the beats are straight breaksy, but it's still got that kind of mood. And it's also, it's a long form listen.
Yeah.
This isn't an immediate tune. Don't get me wrong, it's not, what is it, like 4.5 minutes? So it's not like a 7-minute epic. But you know what I mean? Similar to our Glue, I guess it takes a while to build.
Yeah.
And and that's cool, man. Yeah. Do you know what I mean? Sometimes not every tune is up front,
100%. It's like it fits on the mixtape as a different journey to like, and it does definitely fit a different audience as well.
Yeah.
And it's the one thing with it as well, in the back of the tune, there's a held atmosphere which goes through the whole tune, which is just like this kind of like minor seventh at the very back of the mix, and it kind of creates this kind of haziness all the way through the tune, which is kind of uplifting, but at the same time sits in the middle ground, if you know what I mean. So that's why the track itself sits kind of constant, do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
There aren't any sections where I take that out, so it's like always present in
and
there.
That's something that you quite like as a producer, don't you? Adding those kind of textures that are there almost more as like a texture than a harmonic or melodic intro. I mean, I guess there's elements of both, but
there is texture in there.
Yeah.
And from discovering Burial, for example, and James Blake,
and they love
stuff,
crackles, and
it's just like capturing the room noise and not getting too like, don't take it out.
Yeah.
Like, this is what I love about James Blake. Like, there's a lot of things in his recordings where you're just like, damn, they didn't even like try and tidy that up at all. But that's why I love it, because you feel like that they're just in the room.
And
you know
that's
what I mean?
what, like, as I say, that
it's not too polished.
Yeah, and but that's where I feel like a lot of that more sort of, I guess you maybe like alternative electronica.
Yeah.
It actually, they bring a real like musical, like you produce in the box.
Yeah.
They add some elements that very clearly are kind of out the box.
Analog hardware.
And like bringing that, that magic from, say, a band recording.
Yeah, for sure.
The imperfections. Do you know what I mean? Like, that's what a lot of your, for stuff I like in terms of when I'm listening to more band music.
Yeah.
Like, some of my favourite kind of alternative rock albums and punk albums, it's some of the messiness or the imperfections that make it.
It feels human, doesn't it?
Yeah, and it's that's it. That's the word I was looking for. The human.
Yeah, the human.
And like a lot, I love it when electronic producers bring that kind of.
Yeah.
Because we are imperfect, and like that's the difference between you making the tune.
Yeah.
Or the recording session or whatever, than it is like a fucking AI robot making the tune.
Mm-hmm.
And so is that something you're quite conscious of, I
I'm
guess.
very conscious now.
When it's right,
Yeah.
obviously.
But
like,
I've become conscious of it over the years because I've learned what it was for so many years, because I've always worked in the box, and it's a mixture of things. It's workflow, because I work fast and I do so many projects outside of ENiGMA Dubz as well. I'm always like precious with my time in a sense.
Yeah.
And I went through a stage years ago when I wasn't so busy where I'd experiment more, and I'd just sit down and be like, it doesn't matter if I don't make a tune today, I'm just going to fuck around and use a different synth and stuff.
Well, and explore the software.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Whereas now I'm like, right, my time's precious. I'm going to make sure I'm using my time for something that I need to do for work. It's very rarely just for 2 hours of just like exploring stuff. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It does happen, but then I make sure I finish the tune with it. And over the years, I'd always wonder what it was about certain digital music which felt empty. And I didn't get it for years, and I'd always be like listening and referencing other tunes. And then I started to realise that people who were using hardware, a lot of the hardware does have noise with it as well. White noise in the background and a dirtiness about it. And then I started to clock onto it. So what I started to do was I started to use plugins to replicate what hardware does. And something really simple is by bit crushing. So by bit crushing, you take a sound, say if it's 16-bit and it sounds all clean, and then turn it down to like 12 or 8-bit. So then outside of the sound, you get this dirty, distorted sound with it. And then I started to realise, damn, all of the hardware synths have this built in and you don't have an option. And it has this dirtiness about it. So with Vibes and like Glow actually perfectly, the bass sound, which is a Reese bass, I just bit crushed it down to like 8-bit. So it's got this noise behind it as well. And the same with the atmospheres and stuff. And I use atmospheres and textures a lot in my tracks to give it this kind of natural human, like what I said with Burial.
Yeah.
That's the thing I noticed about Burial.
On Untrue, there's so much of that.
And there's so much crackle. And like the way he samples vocals, it sounds like he sampled bad quality vocals.
Well, and he
just
like
kept
used to,
all the rawness.
And a lot of the vocals he would sample someone covering the original tune.
Yeah, okay.
Who's probably recorded it quite shit.
Yeah.
You know, just on a fucking direct in to their laptop or whatever. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Amateur vocalists who don't, you know, they're not in a nice studio, but that kind of gives it.
And I think he was being raw with his processing because he was using Audacity, I believe. So it was like really basic ways of putting tracks together, but it kept so much natural
and that's
sound to it.
An interesting thing to taking it back to the Awakening album, you know, the ASMR track.
Yeah.
The lead vocal on that, which obviously you treated post-production, but was literally recorded into the vocalist's phone.
Yeah. She recorded, Liz recorded it into her phone, and she said to me, let me know if it sounds good enough. If not, I'll record it again. And I was like, this is perfect for the ASMR track because I wanted that side of it. Do you know what I mean? Like for me, like I do actually really like ASMR, and I use it when I need to detox. And I listen to ASMR when I'm on tour all the time, especially if I'm in a hotel and I've come back from a set and I'm in a dead quiet room. My ears are still ringing from the night, and like I'm in a room on my own, away from the family and stuff. I'm like, damn, I feel isolated now. So I'll just put some ASMR. Or there's one video which I listen to all the time on YouTube, which is called Woodland Ambience. And it's just
it just creates
it's
an
just the
atmosphere.
sound of being in the woods.
Yeah.
And I always remember listening to this really cool podcast with an astronaut, and he was saying when he went to the space station, all of the Russian astronauts all took with them Earth ambience with them. They had birds singing, they had trees, and they had videos, and they'd all watch it in the day, and it made them feel like they were back at Earth again, because otherwise you're in this like drone sounding like,
oh my god,
and it's so true, man. Having that is so comforting for me.
And it's interesting how those kind of things are very subtle in that, like, if you're not a producer yourself or you're not a hugely analytical listener, you know, similar to like what you said when you were just a fan before you got into the production, you didn't quite realise, they're more subtle, almost like
they're techniques that you
that evoke an emotion, but listeners won't necessarily cotton on to why, but they, if you took them away,
if you took it out, it would,
you know what I mean, it would create a whole,
every single future garage track that I make has a vinyl crackle in the background, without fail. And if I took it out, you'd suddenly be like, wow, this feels a bit sparse in sections, but just having that texture glues it all together.
Yeah.
And you feel like it's all together. Do you know what I
Yeah.
mean? So I always use textures. Even
Yeah.
in the hard-hitting dubstep stuff, quite often, I'll have something in there which is just adding texture to it.
Yeah, sick, man. So yeah, we got there. Glow.
Yeah. What's
so
next?
so is We Can Go. So this one is a whole different story, really.
Oh, yeah. This
mean,
goes back.
Yeah. I mean, do you want to sort of expand on it?
Yeah. So We Can Go was made in 2013. It was made with a guy called Lippy. He was a sick vocalist. Lippy, actually, funny enough, started as a beatboxer called Lippy Cool. And he was beatboxing at Glastonbury and stuff. So he was a sick beatboxer. And I got to know him very randomly because he did a voiceover for a friend who was an MC. And he did a voiceover for his mixtape. And I heard the voiceover and I was like, oh, that's sick. Can I get it? And I made a tune called Messy, which is a really, really hard-hitting dubstep tune. So after that, I knew Lippy and I spoke to him. I said, do you want to work on a track? And I sent him the dub for We Can Go. No, actually, no, I'm wrong. He sent me a load of recordings and it was just ad-libs. It wasn't even a song. And he said, you know what? If you can do
Just
something
little
with
phrases.
anything, little phrases.
Yeah.
And he said, just do your thing with it. And I love working with vocals. I just love working with vocals. So We Can Go came together from just experimenting with different ad-libs and stuff and doing this really soulful future garage tune. And it went on my SoundCloud in 2013 as a sample.
And this was when you didn't have any sort of strategy behind
No
your
strategy.
career.
It was just
you
like,
just threw it up on SoundCloud.
I've made some music.
Yeah.
I just want everyone else to hear this now.
Yeah.
And then most of the time for me, once I've made the tune, once it's out there, I'm just like, right, this is done now.
Yeah.
People can hear it. I've fulfilled myself. Like, I feel good about the tune.
Yeah.
See you later. Do you know what I mean? It's like,
And that was a cool, I guess, like, because now music's your career, it's a bit different.
Very different, yeah.
But whereas that was just,
Yeah.
you're expressing yourself.
And SoundCloud in those days was all about that. It was such a healthy community of people like, when's he going to upload a new tune or whatever. So it was a sample. And then actually back in the day, through Lippy's connections, we actually got a one extra play with We Can Go, which was sick. But then it sat on SoundCloud and it was almost like this kind of like ENiGMA Dubz cult tune that people were like, is this ever going to get released?
And it never has got released.
No, not until now.
Yeah.
But I knew like the right project would be there for it, but he just didn't feel like it was there yet.
And this, I was just, when we discussed the track list and then this came up, I was so...
You're hyped for it.
Yeah,
it's
really.
like, yes, it's finally got somewhere it can go
Yeah,
now.
because it actually, and like you gave it a slight new master, didn't you?
I did touch up the mix down, but
Just to make so it sat cohesively with more modern.
Yeah, with the rest of the mixtape.
Yeah,
really.
and so it's felt it in play. And if you listen to the whole mixtape, which I've been doing the last few days, just because when you've released something, like even as a label guy, like you're in it for the music, and that's why you do it.
Yeah.
And it's been really great listening to it in its entirety. And like as I said to you, I went out on a run, you know, in the middle of the countryside the other day, and I just put this on, and it flows so nicely with We Can Go, from Glow to We Can Go.
It does, yeah.
And
but the original version sounded a little bit like off sonically, not in its own sense, but just as part of that body of work as well. So I gave it the sort of slight new mix down on it.
Well, so do you want to go into that? So how did you... Because I just think obviously it's a bit more nerdy and like, you know, a bit more, I guess, for the producer heads maybe, but I think people will be interested anyway. Just like, so what was the process you went through to take it from the original SoundCloud upload, you know, in 2013? So what's that, you know,
10 years ago?
10,
literally
11,
10
or
years.
11
now
years.
11 now.
Jeez.
It's come out
11
but
years
when I
ago.
did the new mix down, it was like 10 years later.
Yeah, so what did you actually do just to tweak it so it felt right?
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
Before going into that, the one thing that's going to be interesting is from listeners who've listened to it on SoundCloud over the years, the other thing is they've been listening to it through SoundCloud,
which compresses the fuck
and it does
out
compress out of
yeah.
it. So even
Yeah.
if somebody came to the mixtape and I'd just released the same... Give me a second, my cough made off. Good Lord.
We'll edit that out. Well, I don't think we will. I don't know.
We'll keep it in there.
Yeah.
Even if I'd have released the same WAV from 10 years ago, it would still sound cleaner. But
because of the SoundCloud compression.
just because of the compression not being on it. But over the last 10 years, there's certain production techniques which I've learned, which I didn't know back in the day. It's not a bad thing that I didn't use them, but now I've noticed it makes a big difference on the performance of a track on a system or in the car. One of them being sidechaining. So I never used to sidechain anything to my kick. So my bass and my kick would just be kind of sitting together in the mix.
Yeah.
And people who told me about sidechain were like, you should do that in your tunes. But when someone told me I should do something, I was like, I don't want to do that just because I should. I want to keep, because it still sounds good to me. But then over the years, listening to tunes on systems, I would start to notice like the kick and the bass are fighting a little bit sometimes.
Well, and this is a good point. So give a very brief overview of what sidechaining is.
Yeah.
Because I know what it is, but I think it'd be interesting for listeners to know how it can maybe make a tune sound a bit more cohesive.
Yeah, especially with dance music and electronic music. Sidechaining is basically allowing something in the track to trigger something else and create a behavioural change in it. So when you sidechain the bass and the kick, what you do is you set the kick drum. Every time the kick happens in the tune,
which is obviously a big impact. That's one of the biggest. Kick and snare, that's one of the biggest impacts.
Yeah.
Velocity-wise,
in the mix of the percussion,
through the mix,
and the kick quite often sits in the same frequency field as the bass.
Of course, yeah.
The sub bass will sit below. I mean, some kick drums are really weighty. As
where's the kick? The punch. Is that about 100?
The punch is around about 100, like 80 to 120, somewhere like that.
Yeah.
Depending on the tune. But with dance music, especially house music, you've got such a punchy kick. You don't often have a lot of sub end in it, but that's the driving force. And I didn't know about sidechaining, so I never used to do this. Whereas when you use it properly, you don't have to be too aggressive with it. But every time the kick comes in, the bass ducks. And when the kick isn't there, the bass comes back and can fill the whole space. And you can do it so it's so tight, you don't notice it. As a listener, you don't listen and go, the bass is ducking.
Yeah.
But as a mix,
it just helps the clarity. It helps the kick.
It helps the clarity,
a bit more, I guess.
And also, what you do have a tone to a kick. Even if you listen to a kick drum and you think it just sounds like a kick, it is actually quite often hitting a tone.
Oh yeah.
And if the tone isn't the same as the bass note, you end up with this dissonance.
Yeah.
But it doesn't sound tonal; it just sounds messy.
Yeah.
So the sidechain's also there to get rid of any conflicts between the tone and the frequencies. So with We Can Go, I didn't sidechain. So when I did the new mix down, I was like, okay, first of all, I'm going to sidechain the kick and the bass because it'll just clean it up a little bit. Secondly, I use a reverb in Logic, which is standard to Logic, and I've used it since the word go, and it's called Platinum Reverb. It's really basic, but I just love using it. And then inside Platinum Reverb, there's something called Density, and I'd never seen it before. I'd never even basically given it a second look, and it was always on 50%. And I didn't think about it. And over the years, I've realised that density adds some muddiness to the reverb. And over the years, I was like, damn, when I turn the density back up to 100%.
So when you say muddiness, you mean it's taking up more frequency range?
It was adding reverb to the low frequencies,
right?
Which I didn't always want, but I didn't realise.
That's taking up space in the mix.
It's taking up space in the mix. So over the years, I've started to turn the density up to 100%, where before that I didn't know it was there. And in We Can Go, that was one of the early projects where my reverb on everything had this density on in it. So I was like, when I turned it off, I was like, whoa, there's loads more room in the mix now.
Right.
And sometimes I do like the density to be high on it, but only on certain things, which I've learnt over the years, do you know what I mean? So that was another area. All the reverb in the track has been cleaned up a little bit. But what I didn't want to do was to lose its charm too much. And I've got to say, last year I went to play at Soundhaven. When I was driving back in the car, I was sitting with Truth and their management. I'm going to have another drink.
Will. Wasn't it Will?
Yeah, well, yeah, it was with Will, so...
Because he's a big garage fan, isn't he?
Will Saltus, yeah. I didn't realise he was such a big fan of We Can Go. So when I told him it's going to get released and I've done a new mix down, his natural reaction was, you haven't touched it, have you? And I was just like, oh, I have. I've like tightened it up a bit, and I played it in the car, and even my reaction was like, oh, I've kind of
gone a bit far.
I've lost its like charm. Do you know what I mean? I've cleaned it up too much, and even Will was like, I could tell that he thought I don't like this as much, and I said, oh damn, it's not hitting as hard, and he was like, I actually agree with you. I think you've cleaned it too much.
Yeah. So it was finding that balance of doing enough that it just made it feel a bit more, a bit better. I guess a bit more technically.
Yeah, it was more of like trying to do it as a remaster rather than a new mix of it. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And then I came back after the that weekend, and I was like, right, I'm going to go back to the original project, do another new mix of it, and compare it. And then I was like, actually, I'm happy with this now because it just sounds slightly cleaned up. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. But to a lot of, listeners, they might not be able to tell.
Yeah, to a lot of listeners, they won't know.
They'll just think it's the classic.
But those die-hard SoundCloud fans from the original, that's why it's been done like that, yeah.
Yeah. Sick, man. So then, moving on from We Can Go, like, what we thought, like, you love ambient music.
Yeah.
And a lot of time in your sets, you use ambient music.
Like interludes, yeah.
As like an interlude and a palate cleanser.
That's it. That's what I say every time, man.
Yeah, and it's really effective, man. And so it's such beautiful music. I mean, like, a lot of soundtracks use incredible ambient music.
Yeah, it's like soundtracks, Burial, like all of his interludes
some
on
of his
albums.
interludes that just there's not a beat
in McDonald's, man.
Yeah, in McDonald's.
Just how many times I put that in the middle of a set, and then someone afterwards is like, I can't believe you put in McDonald's in the set. That's amazing. I'm like, it's just the perfect way of going from one style to another without it being like, oh, where have you gone? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So using these interludes, it just takes people and they're like, wow, where are we going now? Do you know what I mean?
Definitely.
Yeah.
So that was something, like, when we discussed the project, that I was like really keen.
Yeah.
Because, like, people might not know, but outside of the ENiGMA Dubz stuff, you have done a few soundtracks to documentaries.
Yeah.
One being Paul Merson, which was a soundtrack about, and the reason I'm mentioning is that it was a soundtrack about gambling addiction and alcoholism and
how it can ruin your
drug
life,
abuse. And you did the whole soundtrack to that, and it was very soundscapey, but it had that kind of electronica edge to it, and a lot of there was a pulse, but it wasn't percussion driven a lot. A lot of it was just
definitely, it's just like a pulse,
little synth lines,
or a piano which just kept the rhythm going,
that gave the track its kind of momentum.
Yeah.
So the reason I'm referencing is like kind of this Float With Me reprise, which is where you've essentially sort of gone in again on Float With Me, but it's this ambient electronica.
Yeah, no percussion.
Yeah.
And it's just the elements of the track which are almost like drones then. Because I love just drones. I mean, early days when I discovered Brian Eno, and I discovered Brian Eno from 28 Days Later, and then also from David Firth's stuff, like Salad Fingers and stuff.
Oh, yeah.
So I used to watch all of those. And the one thing I noticed straight away about those like cartoons that he used to do in the animations is his choice of music was so abstract, quite often really dark, but then like Brian Eno, Boards of Canada, stuff like that, where it's just really wavy and like sounds like tape, and it's just like drones and atmospheres. I've always loved it. And also, anyone listening to this might not know that I did have another side project called Landscape, and I had a SoundCloud for that, and I used to, and it's on there
still up there.
It's still up there, and it was like pieces that I'd written on an ambience tip, which had no percussion. I actually like thought to myself I should incorporate some of those and do like ENiGMA Dubz refixes and stuff, but I've always loved it, and it's
that's something we could do.
It's totally just therapeutic.
Yeah.
And I just lose myself in that music. So when you said to me like it'd be a really cool idea to do like a reprise of one of the tracks, when I was listening through the tracks, I'd Float With Me straight away. There was so many just layers that I knew just drawing those out would just have their own place as well. So that's why that one
and
got
like
big, yeah.
with music like this, I mean, like, you know, the run I was on about,
Yeah.
that I went on listening to the whole track, this tune actually, like, in some ways hit me the hardest when because I was sort of out in, you know, I sound like a wanker now, but I was out in nature, do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Just running country lanes through foresty bits, and this tune came on and the sun was there, and like just that, you know, that ostinato synth that comes in.
Yeah.
It just in some ways it's really tranquil, but it's also quite epic in a way.
Yeah, 100%.
Like,
I listen to stuff like this in the car all the time. And you know what I love doing? I love putting music like this on in the car, not saying anything. And then on the journey, I just look in the mirror and look at the kids in the back. And I can see them both looking out the window. And I'm like, they've gone somewhere right now. And that's amazing.
It's that whole train journey thing
where
you almost think you're in a film kind of thing.
Exactly,
You're watching the fields go by.
Yeah, and it just like, feels like
this
it's
is
a
like
scene.
the musical accompaniment.
Yeah. And you know
what?
what? When I'm talking about the landscape music, every time I get on a flight to go on tour, wherever it is in the world, I listen to landscape tracks on the flight, and it's the only time I listen to my landscape music. And every time I'm like, I need to do something with this music.
Yeah.
And it's just like, it takes me somewhere else completely. And I'll look out the window while we're taking off and just see the world disappear. And I'm just like, this is where this music's meant for. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So what you're saying about going out for a run, that's total escape, that music is,
Yeah.
For sure.
Man. But also, I mean, that then serves, you know, that purpose of being almost like a palate cleanser.
Yeah.
Because then we go into the more sort of slower halftime tunes.
Yeah.
I say slower, the BPM for this one's, you know, 130, isn't it?
Yeah,
Twilight.
it's even moodier, isn't it, then, after that?
But it kind of serves as that segue.
Yeah.
And almost, the palate cleanser, and it resets, and then Twilight comes in.
Yeah.
And it's, although it's still very on that vibey, you know, soundscapey, but it's got a definite slight change in mood.
Yeah.
And obviously the trap elements.
Yeah, it's a bit darker.
It's a bit
on the bass.
darker.
It is darker, but then soulful as well.
Yeah.
So it's just dark.
And it's so it's still melodic,
Yeah.
like in the way you've used the vocal sample. But yeah, it's quite interesting how then Float With Me, the reprise, sort of serves as that.
Yeah, yeah.
And then so I guess the final two tunes.
Yeah.
Because we don't really need to talk about the edits and the extended mixes.
No, yeah.
Because we kind of covered that. But yeah, so it's Twilight into Walk Away, and it's halftime rather than, you know, more up tempo.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, they're not garagey. I mean, well, Twilight's very trappy influenced,
but that kind of electronic trap, rather than vocal trap.
And what I did with this is what I did with Lost Souls as well. So I purposely didn't quantize the hats, because when I did Lost Souls, I did it just to experiment and mess around, and afterwards I was like, it's giving it a certain swag to it. So with Twilight,
and for listeners who don't know what that means, quantizing is where you fit something to a grid.
Yeah, so it snaps it to a grid and it makes it perfectly on time. So I purposely moved some of the closed hat hits just off the beat to the point where it kind of just, even without knowing it, gives it a swag to it.
And a bit of a shuffle.
Gives it a shuffle.
Yeah.
And like if you listen to a live drummer in a band, there isn't any quantize going on, and that's kind of
and that's what I'm
beauty
getting at.
of it. Yeah.
Well, but the problem is in some band settings, and I personally hate it, is that they will quantize the drums even though it's played.
Right.
They then edit it post production.
Yeah.
And you
and
lose.
It's so produced.
I mean, some of that's because, to be like honest, the drummer's shit.
Drummer. Yeah.
And
so
they have
they've
to
got to
tidy
it. Yeah.
But a lot of the time, it's a production choice when the drummer is perfectly good, and sometimes actually, the personality of the drummer comes through, because some drummers, their hats sit slightly ahead of the beat, some slightly behind, and it gives the groove. And really, really good drummers, like the session players, will deliberately do that.
Yeah,
dependent on the tune.
Yeah,
and it gives that space in the percussion. Do you know what I mean? It gives it its flavour in the groove.
And that's what I love about certain MCs and vocalists who flow purposely late or early, and it just gives it this mad swag about it, and that's their character then.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So that's interesting that was your approach to this. To give the drums a bit of a...
Yeah, it just gives it their own character. I remember when I did Lost Souls, somebody commented on Facebook saying, I love how off the hats are, and I was like, yes, somebody noticed. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That's what gave it its feel. So with Twilight, it's got those kind of dark, trappy feels to it. But a big part of Twilight are all the vocal samples. So, like, they're all kind of gospel vocal samples because I wanted it to be really soulful. And then the synth, there's just a synth rolling in the background, some synth keys, which are really melancholic and, like, they're not happy in any way at all. So you just get this moodiness about Twilight. And I remember going, just after it came out, I went for a walk in the Peak District. And I was walking through the woods, and I was like, "This is the setting for this tune." It's just this kind of like bleak, but it's like haunting nature to it. But then because the 808 bass in it is heavy.
Well, I was going to mention the 808.
It gives it that sort of slap to it. Do you know what I mean as well?
And like tonally as well, the bass, is it just staying on one note?
Yeah. The bass keeps you rooted there.
Yeah.
There's not much movement.
No.
And there's just, with the 808 in that, I've kind of given the mid-range quite a boost. So rather than it just being sub, there's like a hum to it as well.
So it's taking up a bigger frequency range.
And there's sections in the tune which I switch between a pure sub 808 and then like a boosted mid-range 808, which has this hum come through as well. So
And this is one that definitely, like, on a system would you'd know about it.
Definitely. That'll be like a set starter for me.
Yeah. Because a lot of the time you often start at like 120, 130 before you then push up to 140.
Yeah.
So this can serve as like a nice...
100%, yeah.
And it's what's cool about it is it's moody and vibey, and it's like tinged with a tiny bit of euphoria.
Yeah.
But it's still quite dark.
It is dark, yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
It
so
is.
it's really not out of keeping with some of your heavier tunes.
No, 100%, definitely not. And I actually made Twilight initially as a beat to pass out to MCs. In my mind, I made it as a trappy, dark kind of 130 beat, and it had no vocal cuts on it. And when I made it, the synth line wasn't that prominent either. It was mainly 808s, and I was going to say that we should give this to the publisher to find a vocalist for it. And then the more I sat with it and I started to experiment with these like gospel vocal cuts, I was like, oh man, I'm really losing myself in this tune.
It's interesting because that got gospel cuts. I mean, like, for example, Jamie XX uses gospel cuts a lot. What is it about that?
It's just
from a character point of view.
It's the soulful side of it. It's just the soulful, like the harmonies you get from it, the tone of the voices. Yeah, I'm not religious at all, but gospel music, it's hard to find anyone who's not moved by that. Do you know what I mean? It just gets under your skin.
Yeah.
It's the tone, it's the style of chords that they hit. It's kind of jazziness to it as well. Do you know what I mean? So, yeah, having those vocals. As soon as I started messing around with vocal lanes, and it was just as an experiment one day, because I was like, oh, this has got a space for this kind of like melancholic nature to it. And then I thought, right, this isn't going to have an MC on it. I'm going to make this like its own song almost, really.
Yeah, sick, man. And like that was something that I was really, I guess, pleased about, is that even though it's all, this mixtape was in the vibes, I guess similar to Heaters in that it's all 140 bangers Heaters, but there's still a flex.
Yeah, there is a flex
within
in styles and flavours.
Yeah,
definitely.
And very much with this vibe stuff.
Yeah.
Like, there's some beautiful soundscapey, very ethereal tunes, and then this is like very moody.
Yeah,
and
moody,
and the fact that we're able to do that is
sick.
very cool.
Oh,
do you
man,
know what I mean?
100%.
And like, so moving on to Walk Away again, it almost takes it even further in that direction.
It does.
I mean, it's a dubstep tune first and foremost, but like the bass hits, as we discussed earlier, and even like just this is where the lyrics kind of do come into it, because I don't know, like we've all had moments in our lives where maybe we've either lost someone really sadly, or a relationship, you know, whether it's a love or a friend
or a friendship,
something sours, or it's just circumstantial. Someone moves house or whatever, or they move country. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And like
some heartache going on.
Walk Away just conjures that feeling of whether it's loss or do you know what I mean?
Yeah,
so emotionally, immediately, although it's a song that's still very melodic, there's that sort of sadness and heartache.
It is that, and it was definitely because of my headspace at the time, because when I made that, I was on tour, I was in Seattle, and I'd got 4 days after my show, before my next show, and I'd just booked this hotel for 5 nights. So I was away. The time difference from the UK to Seattle is like the biggest one. It's like 8 hours.
Yeah.
So the jet lag
PST.
really got me. And I'd just done this show, and then I got 4 days by myself in Seattle. And I'm fine traveling by myself, and I got on okay. But there was this, because I was jet lagged, I was just waking up at 3:34 every morning,
Yeah,
regardless.
I remember you telling me at the time.
What time I went to bed.
Yeah.
And because I booked a hotel with a gym every morning at 4, I would wake up and be like, oh, for God's sake, I can't sleep. I'd go to the gym and I'd just
good job
do
it
like,
was a 24-hour gym. Do you
yeah,
know what
trust
I mean?
me, it was a 24-hour
Yeah.
gym, and I'd just go on the running machine. I thought to myself, right, I'm going to knacker myself out now, and I'll definitely sleep tonight. But without fail, I'd still be getting woken up by the jet lag. So I was in Seattle, I was jet lagged, I was feeling tired, I was feeling a bit isolated because I was on my own, and I was like in this position where I've got no shows for 4 days. I don't really want to be out here now. I'd love to be at home.
It's
I'm
when
away
you
from
miss
the
your family. Yeah.
Exactly, do you know what I mean?
Because it's like when you're in the thrust of like
yeah.
show after show.
Yeah.
And like, don't get me wrong, that's how we like to do your tours.
Yeah,
is
yeah,
where we're
yeah.
packing them in.
Sure.
I imagine, you're full of adrenaline.
Yeah.
It's
You haven't
like
got time to
you're not
yeah.
even thinking, whereas this gave you a sort of almost a window to
reflect.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was total reflection, and we definitely try to avoid big gaps. Not because of my mental state, just because on a tour,
Well,
you don't want these down days. You're spending money on
terms
hotels.
of financials,
You've got to get your food all the time.
Yeah.
You end up spending a load of money. So I was there in Seattle, and after I'd been to the gym in the morning, I'd go for a walk around the area. And my hotel was on the sort of like at the edge of the town, so it was like a big main road.
Really cool cities. I'd love to go. I've never been.
Really cool city.
Like the history with music there as well, with grunge and like now the bass music and electronic scene. It's really cool.
A really nice vibe, and also very similar weather to the UK.
Yeah.
And I was there in October, so it was gloomy and it was wet.
Yeah.
So I was like in this headspace, and then somebody in Seattle, out to Alex, he's a guy called Alex. I met him at the show, and he said to me, I've got a really cool playlist for you. I think you'll like it, because we started chatting more about music. And it's actually a playlist that's curated by one of the guys out of Noisia. And it's like it's a Spotify playlist.
But it's not drum and bass then?
Not drum and bass at all.
No.
And there was a track in there by somebody called Karen, and it's called Forever. And it got so under my skin, it was like therapeutic for me listening to this song. And towards the end of the song, the vocals continue and get wetter and wetter and wetter with more and more reverb, to the point where it's just like a drone, and it lasts for 3 minutes, and it just totally tails out. So I remember walking around Seattle looking for coffee shops and stuff, listening to this tune on loop for like 2 days, and I was in this space in my head. It wasn't a bad place, but I was just like in this space, and walk away that's the mood I was in.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So when I made Walk Away, I made that at like 4 a.m. when I woke up and I couldn't sleep. Started laying down synths and stuff, and they're all analog sounding synths as well. And then the vocal, I found the vocal, and I was just like, whoa, this is giving it a completely different slant now. And it was a cut, the vocals from Splice, and I just cut like 3 words out of a full verse of this vocal. And because it's wet as well in the mix. And then after the vocal section, there's this section where there's like it sounds like a synth playing, but it's actually a vocal. I'm not going to try and replicate it, because I'll sound nothing like it. But it's really haunting.
Yeah.
It's really haunting. I remember listening to it, and the way my head was, and just that with the deep bass. And it was just, it was meant to be. And when I listen to that tune, it takes me back immediately to that moment. And I don't dislike it, because I'm just like, I feel like those moments, especially touring, people talk about it a lot online, but the mental side of touring is a big deal. And quite a lot of people fall off when they're on tour, because mentally, either they're exhausted or they're partying hard.
Or a combination of both.
A combination of both. And for me, it was the isolation, where that was a real testing time on my tour.
Also the travel. Like, the travel is tiring.
Travel's a lot.
Beyond the shows itself.
Yeah.
The actual logistic, and weirdly, even though you're not necessarily moving much, the toll on the body when you're traveling.
When you're flying and stuff, like, it's not physically exhausting, but it then is as well, because you just feel like you've had a long day. So that track takes me back to that, and I've played that in quite a lot of sets, and it always sets the mood at the end of a set, especially when I go to the vibey dubstep stuff at the end. I love to go on that one at the end, because
It's a bit haunting.
It's haunting, yeah. Especially if I'm playing last set of the night.
And also the synths like have that kind of 80s, you know, that the high part that comes in. Yeah. It's got that kind of 80s.
Very much 80s.
Retro.
They're all 80s retro synths.
Flavors, yeah. And that's cool as well. And even the snare, if you got a similar kind of gated reverb or whatever,
the snare's got this short reverb on it, and it's kind of got all the top end rolled off it as well.
Right.
Because initially that track was a lot harsher. And I purposely made it quite harsh. And I remember you speaking to me on the master and saying, I think it needs toning down a bit in relation to the mixtape.
Yeah, it wasn't that I disliked it.
No,
I
know.
It was cool, but it was just it just felt a little bit too out of step.
Yeah. With the rest of the tracks.
What's interesting is it's still like, and it was testament to you playing it at the Manchester show.
Yeah.
It still hit pretty hard.
Yeah, it's still got a slap to the snares. The snares are hard, and in the percussion, there's quite a lot of glitchy bits that come in, which give it this electronic sort of like glitchy nature that's quite in your face. So it's a mixture of the two. Do you know what I mean? It's just basically me jet lagged in a city, constantly awake at 4 a.m. thinking, do I fly home for 3 days and blow the whole tour budget? Or do I just stick this out and just see where it goes?
Nice.
That's walk away.
Well, there you go, man.
Yeah.
Well, that covers the tracks, man. I think that was really insightful.
Yeah, it's class.
And good to chat about it. And like, what's cool is I'm learning like some more,
sure.
because it's when we're working together. Obviously, we work together really closely, and we're talking every day. But just by the nature of what we do, like it has to be quite task focused.
It does.
So we don't often get to have a conversation of such depth.
Yeah,
do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
To really explore.
Yeah.
And even like, I guess from your perspective, to me as a listener and a music fan, as well as being a musician.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? I'm maybe able to go into like some more detailed things. Do you know what I mean?
Places
like,
I can't go because I'm too involved in the track as well.
Exactly.
I'm you're outside the box here.
So yeah, man, I really enjoyed that. Just before we sort of wrap this up, thought it'd be cool, like beyond just the music itself, just to chat maybe a bit about the USB that we've done.
Yes.
For Morii Records.
Yeah, man.
Because like the whole thing with this mixtape thing, like I mean, people sort of, I guess, I mean, people are aware of this, but the vinyl market is meant to be like, we love physical products.
Yeah.
We did a vinyl for Awakening, which went really well.
Yeah.
There's still a few available. I think we did a run of 500. I think there's 40 left.
Okay, yeah.
Which for our first vinyl release, you know, we're really, really pleased about
especially doing 500 as well, yeah.
So yeah, if you want to snag that up, there's only 40 left. You know, go get it.
Get to Bandcamp,
ENiGMA Dubz Bandcamp, or there's a few stores I think that still have them, maybe, but quite a few have just completely sold out.
Yeah.
But yeah, like I think people are aware, but the vinyl market is being difficult. So we were thinking like, how can we do a physical product, but like with vinyl, like obviously
it's not as accessible for everyone, is it?
Yeah, it's not as accessible, but it had the beauty of it is obviously it's very tangible. You can look at it and feel it, and even playing it is great.
Yeah, something special about playing vinyl, man.
But what we liked with when we were doing a bit of research, like how can we do a more accessible product, and also one that doesn't have like such mental lead times, and also expense.
It does come into it, man.
And and also, you know, with the cost of living crisis and everything, it's harder. But yeah, with these cassette USBs, we sort of found something that's still feels very tangible. It looks,
and they're cool because they look like tape.
They look like a tape.
It is a tape.
Yeah.
It feels like a tape,
and the artwork's really like, you know, laid out and all of that. But it gives you then the complete scope that you've got a fucking 8 gig USB.
Yeah, you can put your stuff on it as well. You can play it on the deck.
Yeah, but also for us, we could load a lot. So which is why then we've put the sample packs on there, and unreleased dubs that are just exclusive.
Just for the cassettes. And there's only 100.
Only 100. They've already sold pretty well. Heat is completely sold out really quickly.
Yeah.
So do you know what I mean? Like people, and we won't be repressing. Like that's the whole thing with this mixtape series. And it also, what I like about it is like it gives the word tape more resonance. You know, right? Mixtape, it literally is.
He's actually on a tape as well. Yeah.
So, but with this USB, so we've done as with the heaters one. So there's a sample pack. How many?
There's 100 samples on this one. I did 80 for heaters. So for vibes, I did 100, and it's a mixture of percussion, atmospheres, bass. There's like synth lines on there. Yeah, there's enough there for you to get really experimental with it, and I'd love to see what people do with it as well.
We were kind of interested this for us because we get to find out more about your audience.
Yeah,
do you know what I mean? Because
sure.
like it'll be interesting to see how many people get into the sample pack versus the dubstep and grime sample pack that's on heaters.
Yeah,
do you see what I mean?
Yeah. I know
that is quite interesting,
and it's a lot of fun making the sample pack as well because I haven't done that many sample packs over the years.
So how do you go about that when you're making the sample packs?
So the way I approached heaters is what I've done with vibes. I've chosen certain tracks off the mixtape and broken them down and then re-edited the samples so they're completely new, but they've got the sonic sort of sound of the mixtape it's come from. Do you know what I mean? So all like the synth loops I've put on there and the synth sounds, they're synths that I would have used in the vibes mixtape. Some of them are like 80s vibes, trancey sort of synths, and then I've just made new samples out of them. And in the same with the percussion as well, they all lend themselves to the overall sonic vibe of the mixtape. But what I wanted to do as well, I didn't want it to just be, this is the sound from this tune, if you know what I mean. However, with the Vibes mixtape, the 3 exclusive tracks which are on it that you can't get anywhere else.
On the tape USB.
On the tape USB, there's 3 tracks on there which are not going to go anywhere else online, and 100 people are going to have them and no one else will have them. So I've broken those down into some of the samples from those tunes.
Cool, yeah.
So there's only 100 people with that sample,
yeah.
and anyone else will be like, I've never heard that in a tune before.
Yeah.
And some people are like, I have, because I've got the cassette, do you know what I mean?
Yeah, that's
and I can
sick.
do my own thing with it then.
Nice.
Which I'd love to see, so yeah.
Yeah, wicked, man. Yeah, man. And what I mean, we won't name them, but these tunes, the extra tunes, is it more like on the sort of halftime tip, or?
There's a mixture on there. There's a dubstep track on it, and the dubstep track is like a throwback to early ENiGMA dubstep where it's soulful. There's a track that he called You, which is really soulful, and it's still bass heavy, but it's a total journey. So there's a track on there, and then there's like this mad halftime tune, which just is completely different to anything on the Vibes mixtape as well.
That's really cool.
It's really cool. It's really expansive and atmospheric. So yeah, I mean,
and then you've got, is it a breaksy tune?
And then there's a breaks tune,
which was
on there.
one that thing is with this one, it's a wicked track.
Yeah.
And we were considering it for a main release, but just something didn't quite gel.
Yeah, something sonically with it didn't gel.
Didn't quite fit.
And rather than changing the track to fit a mixtape, I was like, it works as it is, do you know what I mean? So I didn't want to change it. It's very much a breakbeat tune with the classic live drumming breakbeat sound, like an amen break. So it was like, right, this is perfect for an exclusive tune.
Yeah.
So
100 lucky people will be able to
get your copy because they're gone after 100.
Yeah, mate. Fucking pleasure to chat with you.
Great chat, man. It's really good to go through it.
And like, I mean, in many ways, this is a bit of a teaser of another project that we've got going on that we haven't announced yet. Yeah. But yeah, if you've enjoyed this sort of more long form chat, delving into music, and like the music industry as well.
Yes.
We might have something coming.
Watch your space,
for you.
Yeah, on a regular basis.
Yeah, absolutely. But yeah, man, big up.
Good chatting, mate.
Yeah, good chat. And,
Morii Records.
Morii Records, man. Yeah, onwards and upwards.
Thank you for the support on the mixtape, people.
Yeah, definitely, man. The reaction's been really sick, and it always, as from a label point of view, you're excited for a release, but there's an element of nerves as well.
Of course.
Particularly when you're taking people on a slightly different sonic journey. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like that step from heaters to vibes.
Yeah.
They're 2 equally very important parts of the ENiGMA Dubz sound.
For sure.
And as a label for Morii, when we've got some wicked plans in the works in terms of signing artists ourselves.
Yeah.
Not just doing ENiGMA Dubz stuff, and that's the important next step of our journey. Like, we want to be able to release, or it's going to be electronic music and predominantly bass music.
Yeah.
But that we can take different, allow artists to explore.
That's it. And let people show their true colours.
Yeah, and like not be defined by a lane, or do you see what I mean?
Yeah,
so,
we're not aiming it for a specific scene, if you know what
Yeah.
I mean. It's bass music, but I think it's important to allow an artist to go to places without saying, no, this has got to be a dubstep release.
Yeah.
So what have you got to offer? And then you get gems and you're like, whoa, people need to
Exactly.
hear this, you know what I mean? Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, sick, man. Big up.
Hell
Good
yeah.
to chat.
Good
And,
stuff, mate.
Yeah, thanks everyone for listening. We'll be back soon.
Yeah. Catch you guys
Big up.
later.
Cheers.